Is that atrium inside your buildings a specific characteristic feature of your bureau? Is it in Russian we call it fishka?
Yes. The right answer is yes. Because we've been doing atria inside buildings as moments of surprise, as moments of lightness, as spaces for navigation and visual clarification, let's say, of the orientation inside the building for many years. Patrick has also been a very strong proponent of atria inside buildings, and in that way, I think, yes, there are important features in all of our buildings. I was thinking about it in the beginning a little bit because I was trying to figure out if all of our buildings have atria inside. Yeah. And I don't think that's the case, but a lot of them do.
Do any other architects use it?
John Portman, American architect, has done buildings with incredible atria inside. Of course, a lot of buildings have atria. It's not our claim to uniqueness, but we do believe that an atrium space in these kinds of buildings is a very important element.
Do you use or think about available materials that already exist, or do you ask technicians to develop some other materials that you could make your specific project?
Well, we didn't come yet to the point where technologically we can order particular materials, meaning synthetic materials. But it's a very interesting proposition, and it's a proposition that I'm very interested in, whether these are plastics or 3D printed materials or others. In practicality, at this moment in time, we do research on what materials are locally available, or at least locally sourceable, meaning can be brought in to the particular locality. And in some cases, some elements or some objects may need to be specialist. I think, in fact, those moments in the building are very important. That's why we go so far to create bespoke or customized solutions for them. But in principle, we do try to work within a certain repertoire. However, we also feel that it's our professional obligation to push the limits of the profession, of the industry forward, so that we can achieve good levels of innovation. I think without innovation, there is nothing. So, in principle, to be able to challenge what is available or what is thought as normal or what can be achieved in a particular project is one of the most crucial roles of an architect in the design of buildings today.
What principles by the founder of your bureau, Zaha Hadid, will you adhere to by all means, and what new will you develop in your bureau?
Well, Zaha Hadid Architects is a very mature company now. We have about 400 employees. We have a structure inside with the board of directors, the associate directors, a very broad associates base, and very talented designers in the company. So we feel that the structure of the company is able to take us through the transformations that will be needed in the future. Undoubtedly, this moment in time is something that's very critical for us to maintain our level of performance, our engagement, our credibility. All of those things are things that we are constantly working for. We're very hopeful for the future. We believe that there is a lot of good stuff in there that's worth continuing. And of course, the way Zaha and Patrick have organized the company at large, I think gives us the possibility to think that it's a good system to continue in the future. When you say specifically what it is that we would definitely retain moving forward, is that sense of experimentation that Zaha instilled us with. I think it's important to experiment. I think it's important to test new possibilities and new grounds, because I think creativity and creative thinking, design thinking in architectural design needs to challenge and needs to experiment, needs to try to always look at things from a slightly different perspective, so that we can continue learning and progressing and understanding the world around us more and more.
Does your bureau make every project as the only one, the outstanding one, the single one, or do you have any things that are, as it is a cottage industry, some solutions perhaps that are already ready-made standard?
Yeah, no, we don't have ready-made solutions. We don't believe in mass-produced architecture. We believe in mass customization, meaning making everything unique, not making everything the same. If you think about it, and I try to speak about this in my lecture a little bit today, there is of course a lot of things that somebody has to do in the architecture, and there is a lot of work, there is a lot of projects out there, and of course the idea of repetition has something to do with the mode of production that we had in the beginning of the 20th century, meaning with machines that would repetitively do the same job, so that you got a standard, high-quality product, but it was the same from one to the other. And that was actually what the 20th century was about. It was about mass production, it was about repetition, and if you wanted something individualized, then you could change the color or the buttons or something. Nowadays, I think the mode of production is changing. The machines that we're using today for fabrication, for construction, for all sorts of things, and I spoke about this briefly a little bit before, are so agile that they can produce unique objects in every case. 3D printing today is offering us the possibility to design something and then fabricate it immediately, okay? Whether I print a chair in this way or in that way, does that actually change the cost of its production? No, it doesn't. Do we need unique projects? In other words, do we need to design for every particular opportunity, condition, location, body, person, company? I think yes, but with a higher level of intellect. Yeah, in other words, I think that customization is important, especially in the cases where it enhances the product from what used to be to what can be as a better object in the end. I don't believe in producing unique objects for the sake of producing junk that nobody will use and that they become useless in 5 minutes. I don't believe in that. Actually, I was just speaking to somebody before and I said the role of architecture and the role of design by a large extent is to develop objects that have a long lifespan. Now, if you design a toothbrush that is better and it will last potentially longer, or it will have some special features, then that is something that I think is interesting. Yeah, I think there is constantly an evolution, and the way we work in the creative industries is that maybe you see something, you try to do it better, then somebody sees your thing, tries to do it better. So the whole kind of process of investigation and of designing anything from small objects to very large ones becomes a life process almost. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you remember what we talked about in the Sofia master plan, which is a huge project, 400 by 400 meters, so many square meters of area to engage. And that's really the only thing I wanted to show today, how you can work with such big mass to create something that's generally considered beautiful, but at the same time that it has the definition, the detail, or the articulation to be able to correspond to many different conditions, whether these are open plazas, residential buildings, infrastructure or whatever, but generally that it becomes deeply articulated. This is what I'm trying to say. And in the end, if that becomes simple, even better, because you manage to cover all the conditions within a very simple, refined composition.
And what are your plans in Russia?
Some of us appreciate Russian culture a lot because of its history, because of a lot of the things that Russian culture has produced over the centuries. I think it's an important part of the world, and I don't only mean Moscow. I also mean St. Petersburg. I also mean the peripheries. I think we did finish the Dominion project last year, which was a first step for us. We're doing a private villa for someone in Barvija. We are also working on other projects, including an office building in Skolkovo for a large client. There is things coming and going, and certainly now that we've demonstrated that we understand how the system works here, we've been invited more and we're taken on more seriously as people who can understand how to implement the buildings here and not just imagine them and then make it somebody else's problem to deliver them. So I think in that sense, we are at that point. When I first came to Moscow in 2005, the city was a little bit gloomy. There was, of course, a huge wealth of Soviet buildings that nobody cared about, and I did not understand why, because in our history books and in our books of what is modern architecture, a lot of the buildings that you would see derelict in Moscow were actually part of the things you had to know about, to become an architect. And that was 2005. I think in the last 10 years, a lot has happened. I've since then visited other Russian cities, and I think there is some movement. I think Russian cities have a lot of potential to develop. And everybody's asking these questions because everybody understands this. I think the questions are how and what to do. So I think the reason why these conferences are important is exactly to answer those questions. But I also think that we shouldn't overcomplicate these questions. I think to the degree that is some proposition makes common sense, then I think these things can be tested, perhaps. There is already good, let's say, companies in Russia. There is good designers. There is good, let's say, possibilities. There is the imagination, definitely, to do a lot of these things. So I say, why not? I mean, we would love to be involved in projects like this, whether as strategic thinkers or actually in what we are good at, which is to be designing master plans, buildings, and helping either local governments or private clients to achieve their aims.
Some specific features connected with perhaps documentation or regulatory technical base, which is different from European, or maybe climate, or maybe the procedure of improvement. What is complicated here? Is
the approvals process. Somebody described it to me the other day, and I thought it was very successful. When you try to get a building approved, it's like having to unlock 13 locks with 13 keys at the same time. And of course, if one gets clogged up, then none of them will work. And I thought that was a very clever way to put it. And that speaks by itself, doesn't it? I think There is two issues. From a regulatory point of view, you want to make sure that all the buildings are of a certain standard. Okay, so standards need to be maintained. And these things in the European Union, for better or worse, are very well established. Okay, so every single product has a CE marking, has a certain level of quality, testing procedures, all that. I think is, and it's good that it exists, so you know what products you buy. So when I say we like to continue to experiment in the future, I mean producing or being catalytic in producing products of a particular standard and upward, not starting from scratch and using substandard materials. That's not what I mean. So I think what's important is to allow the industries to develop new products. Yeah, and I think there is a lot of possibility here. There is a lot of brain capacity to be able to develop such things. I think usually people stumble on the fact that there is not a lot of money put into innovation projects to be able to develop things. And I think one and the other need to go together.
What is more important for you as an architect, the functionality of the building or its image?
There is people who believe in formalism. There is people who believe in functionalism. I am a strong believer of the middle between the two. I think many different forms can apply to the same function, and also a certain form can entertain and support many different functions. And I don't think we should be very strict about that balance, but I think buildings have to do both.
Like nature, music, literature, or architecture, producing new architecture. What inspires you?
Inspiration comes from somewhere else. I don't think inspiration sits in our head waiting to happen. I think to allow oneself to be inspired, I think one has to also maintain a certain level of humility, to keep your eyes open, to keep your mind open, to see and to understand how people, how circumstances act, and try to create an understanding of the world we are in. I don't believe that there is anything wrong with this world. It's just that our perceptions of it occasionally suffer, and therefore we have to try to learn to look at things from a fresh way. And when you actually go through the process of looking at something maybe even familiar from a fresh point of view, then that's what inspiration is. It kind of it moves you from one condition to another, and in there I think you can find a way to design a chair that you thought it should be like this today, maybe in a better way later on. And I think that generally goes in life for anything, not just the design of chairs, of course.